Living in an old rented house for so long, they finally got to know each other. A viral horror story on Twitter social media, this time shared by the account at Sotry86. In her upload, Sarah said that this story was a true story that she experienced. Sarah is a woman who now lives in a small town in West Java. He had to move to the Flower City to study at one of the well-known universities there. When she moved to Bandung, Sarah went with her father. Her father took Sarah to the rented house where Sarah would live while studying. In that rented house, Sarah will also live with her two cousins, who are pursuing their studies at the same institution and in the same year as her. The eldest cousin is named Jani, and the cousin older than Sarah is named Ava. Sarah is the youngest among the three of them, considering she just graduated from high school the same year. After a 2.5-hour journey, she finally arrived in Bandung. This is the first time Sarah is living far away from her parents. Mixed feelings were surely experienced by Sarah. After the car was parked, Sarah hurriedly got out and collected her belongings. While carrying her luggage, Sarah and her father immediately walked down a small alley. Walking a bit further in, they finally arrived in front of that rented house. "Assalamu alaikum," we greeted while entering the house with its door wide open. "Wa alaikum salam, Mang," Jani and Ava replied. "Tos dugi gening. Sok atuh sakyu ayana, Sar. You've arrived. Please accept it as it is, Sar," said Teava to me. At that moment, Sarah smiled, nodded, and looked around. The house was an old 2-story building and appeared a bit neglected. Sarah understood this, especially since her budget for renting the house was very limited. The staircase leading to the second floor was made of wood with wooden handrails. It looked quite roughly made. Sarah approached the stairs and looked upwards. At the top of the stairs was a wall. To the left, there was a small door leading to the laundry area and a gutter. To the right, there was a doorless room that could only be entered by slightly stooping. This room was located directly above Sarah's bedroom, situated between the stairs and Ava's room. Ava's room was the one closest to the front door. Jani preferred the room furthest inside, about 3 steps from the stairs, right across from the kitchen, which served as access to the only bathroom in the house. There was a spacious, empty area in front of Sarah's and Ava's rooms, which would be used as a gathering space with worn-out carpets. Furthermore, Sarah immediately organized her belongings in her new room. There were some damp stains on the brown-colored walls, and some parts were peeling. It's no wonder it feels cold and damp, she thought. But it's okay. This place is quite comfortable. The evening arrived, and Sarah's father bid farewell to go home. With a heavy heart, Sarah saw him off, unable to bear the thought of the house being left with only her father and mother. It should be noted that both of Sarah's siblings had their own lives in other cities. As the youngest child, it was difficult for her to leave her parents. Long story short, during the first month of living in the house, Sarah didn't feel anything unusual. Or maybe she just ignored it because she was busy with orientation and preparing for college. Oh, by the way, Sarah wasn't a psychic. However, at times, she could sense the presence of supernatural beings around her. Until one day, while her studies were well underway and assignments started piling up. Sarah had to return to her rented house around 7 in the evening and fell asleep immediately. After a long sleep, Sarah woke up to her surroundings being extremely dark. It was Sarah's habit to turn off the bedroom light when she went to sleep, as she couldn't sleep with the lights on. However, it was pitch black, and Sarah had to adjust her eyes to the darkness. After her senses fully gathered, Sarah realized that the darkness was due to the room's light in front of her bedroom being off. Usually, at night, that light was turned on, and its light seeped through the window above the bedroom door and through the gaps in the fragile door. At that moment, Sarah felt around in the darkness for her phone and found there were missed calls and messages while she was asleep. Both of her siblings messaged her, informing her that they couldn't come home because they were working on a group project at a friend's place. This meant that Sarah would be alone in the rented house. When Sarah looked at the clock, it was already 2 in the morning. She shivered slightly and tried to go back to sleep, but her drowsiness was gone. So Sarah forced herself to close her eyes, and her thoughts wandered. Suddenly, she remembered that when she came home earlier, she opened the front door and immediately turned on the front room light, didn't she? Sarah remembered it very well. She came straight into her room, changed her clothes, and fell asleep. She didn't turn off that light. In fact, the light was always on every night and was the only source of light in the house. So why was it off now? Sarah could only try to stay calm and make sure her memory was correct. When she was about to get up from her bed and turn on the bedroom light, she suddenly heard a faint voice from behind her bedroom door. Hee 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 hee. Thud. Sarah's heart rate felt like it stopped at that moment. Instantly, she refrained from standing up. Sarah just sat on the bed, clutching the blanket tightly. Sarah remained in a vigilant position, torn between believing she heard laughter and trying to convince herself that she had simply misheard. She continued to focus, but all she heard was silence. Slowly, Sarah returned to her lying position. She was cautious, as if she might be waking something up, although she wasn't sure what. The sound of small footsteps running passed by her room. Sarah's brain immediately registered it as a mouse. Mice! Yes, it's mice. Or hopefully just mice, she thought. Before she could convince herself, another sound left her frozen. Thud. Shriek. Thud. Shriek. The sound of something being dragged. It was as if someone with a limp was dragging something around the room in front of her. Occasionally, it came closer to Sarah's room and then moved towards Tay Ava's room before circling again. Hee 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 hee. The soft laughter emerged once more. This time, Sarah was sure she hadn't misheard it. With fear, Sarah covered her entire body with the blanket, closing her eyes tightly. Her clothes were drenched in sweat. At that moment, Sarah tried to recite any verses she remembered, but she couldn't smoothly utter a single one. The thought crossed her mind to get up and turn on the bedroom light. She wondered if the brightness would calm her down. On the other hand, she was afraid that turning on the light might make her see figures that were disturbing her. She remained in the same position for who knows how long. Motionless, and the sounds didn't go away. She didn't dare to uncover herself, fearing that they would appear right in front of her. Her condition was already drenched in sweat. Perhaps because Sarah's body was tired after being tense for a long time, she eventually fell asleep on her own. Sarah woke up when the dawn call to prayer echoed and the strange sounds had disappeared. Even though she felt slightly relieved because there were voices of people in the alley heading to the mosque for the Fajr prayer, Sarah's fear still lingered. Yes, that was Sarah's first encounter with the occupants of the rented house. Although they didn't meet face to face, that introduction left a lasting impression on her. She wouldn't tell her two siblings about the incident. It's not that Sarah was afraid to recount it when she was still living in that house. And they had rented it for 1 year, which meant Sarah had to endure for the next 11 months. After that incident, she only experienced a few minor disturbances, such as things moving by themselves, her blanket being pulled during sleep, or glimpsing fleeting shadows. In short, the month of Ramadan had arrived, and the minor disturbances began to diminish, although not completely gone. Furthermore, Gerald is Sarah's neighbor, who lives at the end of the alley. He is a cool and sociable musician who gets along with Sarah due to his fun personality. Since their first meeting, they became closer. Eventually, one night, they decided to have suhoor together at a cafe in Lembang. "Gerald, pick me up at 9, okay, Nong," Gerald said before ending the call. Nong is Sarah's nickname from Gerald. The plan for suhoor that night would only include the two of them because their other friends couldn't join. It didn't matter to them, as they both favored the open air and the cool breeze. At that time, Sarah had just finished a meeting with the band members. She had joined as one of the vocalists in the band. Singing was Sarah's hobby, and coincidentally, Sarah's band and Gerald's band shared the same base camp. The base camp in question was a house in the Buabatu area owned by Horace, one of the band members. Gerald didn't attend the meeting due to a specific reason. He decided to go home and was dropped off by his drummer. Upon arriving home, Sarah immediately broke her fast and performed the Maghrib prayer. Still feeling tired, she locked the door, lay down, and read the messages that had come in. And Sarah fell asleep. In her sleep, Sarah dreamt of meeting Gerald. "Let's go," Gerald invited. Sarah shook her head reluctantly, somehow aware that she was in a dream. Suddenly, Gerald turned menacing and shouted angrily. Instantly, she woke up from her sleep, startled. In her groggy state, Sarah's eyes were drawn to someone sitting hunched over at the end of the bed near her feet. A man was wearing a hat similar to Gerald's. Sarah's eyes grew heavier. Her drowsiness became unbearable. That wasn't typical for her. She then closed her eyes and suddenly remembered that she had locked her bedroom door before going to sleep. So, how did Gerald get in? Beep, beep. The ringtone of her Sony Ericsson phone signifying an incoming call rang. "Hello? Nong. Gerald will pick you up shortly. Are you ready?" Gerald asked enthusiastically. "Rawld, were you in my room just now?" Sarah inquired, disregarding Gerald's question. "Nope. Gerald just got home and called you immediately." Sarah woke up abruptly. Her drowsiness suddenly vanished. She quickly stood up and grabbed the doorknob while the door remained locked. "Nong, hey," Gerald shouted over the phone. "Yeah, he'll pick me up in 15 minutes. I'll perform the Isha prayer first," she replied. She hung up the phone and immediately left the room. Ajani was sitting cross-legged in the front room of Sarah's room, playing with her mobile phone. Toddy Gerald, could you too? Did Gerald come here earlier? Sarah asked. To Aya, Ajani replied, without looking up from her phone. Nubaleg? Sarah asked again, trying to make sure. Baleg I sadinten yutu Aya tamu. Ajani reassured her. Really, there haven't been any guests all day. Sarah fell silent and tried to dismiss her thoughts. Maybe they were just playing a prank. She quickly performed ablution and prayed. After finishing her prayer, she got ready to leave for Lembang. Due to the cold weather in Lembang and the fact that they were going on a motorcycle, Sarah wore her thickest jacket and her favorite pink knitted scarf. Gerald had already arrived, and they set off for Lembang without knowing that something was waiting for them. The motorcycle they were riding moved slowly as they were still inside the housing complex. They didn't talk to each other and were lost in their own thoughts. As they approached the high school, Sarah noticed an elderly man walking slowly. She continued to observe the old man without realizing it. The old man was far from their motorcycle, positioned on the right side of the road, walking with his back to Sarah and Gerald. As time passed, he got closer. And at the intersection near the high school, the old man turned right, just like they were going to do. After he made the right turn, within 2 seconds, they also followed the same path as the old man. But when the motorcycle turned, there was no one there. The road was empty, with not a single pedestrian in sight. Sarah was startled and instinctively started looking for the old man. The road within the housing complex was straight, without any other turns or alleys. It wasn't possible for the old man to hide. Gerald noticed my odd behavior. Kunayon, Nong? Gerald asked. There were some old men who turned here before we did. Why are they not here? Sarah panicked. Don't overthink it. There was no one around the whole time, Gerald reassured. Because of the strange events earlier in the day, Sarah was starting to get used to it. Finally, she tried talking about various things with Gerald to dispel her fear during the journey. The road to Lembang was still lined with lush trees on both sides. At one point, on the incline before the cafe they were heading to, Sarah saw a black cat crossing the road very close to their path. However, Gerald didn't slow down the motorbike at all. Sarah reflexively tapped Gerald on the shoulder and shouted, "Rald! Yuking! Launen!" Sarah shouted with a slight pause, pointing. Without hesitation, Gerald suddenly stepped on the gas, causing Sarah to stumble a bit. "Stay quiet, Nong. There's nothing there," Gerald responded angrily. Sarah then turned around to look back at the place where the cat had been sitting, and indeed, there was nothing there. It was empty, and she was shocked because it was clear that the black cat from earlier wasn't a hallucination. Later, they finally arrived at the cafe. They quickly got off the motorcycle, chose a cozy spot, and ordered corned beef cheese noodles. Sarah ordered hot sweet tea, while Gerald ordered coffee. Actually, at that moment, Sarah was still uneasy due to the recent incident. But they had agreed not to discuss it and tried to find other topics of conversation. Sarah soon forgot her unease as she immersed herself in the chilly night atmosphere. The clear, starry sky, accompanied by warm drinks, was incredibly enjoyable. Before they knew it, the time for the pre-dawn meal, imsak, had arrived, signaling that they needed to return home to perform the dawn prayer. They asked for the bill. When the waitress came to deliver the bill, she asked, "Oh, miss, do you want to leave now?" she inquired. "Yes," Sarah and Gerald replied simultaneously. Sure?" she inquired, probing further. "Yes, we want to make it for the dawn prayer," Gerald replied. "All right then, please be careful on the road," she advised. "Yes, thank you," Sarah replied. They walked over to the cashier, and another similar conversation occurred, where the cashier urged Sarah and Gerald to be cautious. Without suspicion, they paid and went to the parking lot. A parking attendant approached them, and guess what? The same conversation repeated. Ultimately, the parking attendant asked them to be careful. Instantly, Sarah and Gerald exchanged glances, understanding the uneasy feeling they were experiencing. And it turns out, the events Sarah had experienced before leaving were just the introduction. If only she hadn't been careless and paid more attention to the signs. If only Sarah hadn't insisted on leaving after experiencing the first 2 incidents, Sarah and Gerald wouldn't have experienced